Parsha Samor, Dabir Bnei Yisrael v'Marta Leim, Ki Savol Arts Asher Ani Nosen Lechem U'Tzartem Es Tzira, you'll harvest. Vavesem Es Omer, you'll bring the Korban HaOmer. Reishis Tzirchem Ala Kohen, from the first cuttings. They Nifes Omer, they'll wave it. Now, from the day after Shabbos, whatever that means, we'll see there's going to be a major machlokas what that means. Yinefenu HaKohen. Then, Usfartem Lachem Mimachras HaShabbos, you'll start counting. Again, from the day after whatever Shabbos is, Miyom Aviyachem Es Omer At Nufa, Sheva Shabbosos Tmimos Tiana, 7 complete weeks. Ad Mimachras HaShabbos HaShviz, meaning Tispur Chamishim on the 50th day. V'krafte Mincha Chadash Al Hashem, that's the Shtei Alechem. Remember, the Minchas HaOmer was made out of barley. The Shtei Alechem was made out of wheat. So that's the new Korban. By the way, the Minchas HaOmer allows you to eat the previous year, any grain that was planted from the 16th day of Nisan in the previous year until Rosh Chodesh Nisan of this year. So that wheat is called Chodosh. After you bring the Omer, it's called Yashon, and then you can eat it. Until you bring the Minchas Omer, you could not eat it. Now, after the 16th day of Nisan, after you brought the Minchas HaOmer, you still could not bring menachos made out of wheat until Shavuos, when you brought the Korban Shtei Alechem. That was a matir. That allowed you now to bring menachos made out of the old wheat, the Chodosh, what we call Chodosh, which is now Yashon, but it was still Yashon, it was still Chodosh for the Beis HaMikdash. When you brought the Shtei Alechem on Shavuos, then you could bring menachos, which are made out of flour from the grain of the previous year. So in Dvarim it says Shiva Shavuos Tispor Lach. Again, this is we haven't laned it yet, but we will lane it on the 8th day of Pesach, Kol HaBechor, in Parshas Re'eh. You'll count Shiva Shavuos, Me'echel Chermesh Bakama. Once the sickle is cuts the standing crop, Tochelis for Shiva Shavuos, you should begin to count 7 weeks. Says Rashi over there, Me'achel Chermesh Bakama, Misheniktzra Omer. You start counting once the Omer was cut, Shu Reishis Aktsir. So according to the Torah, the mitzvah Sefirat Ha Omer, counting the Omer, begins the day that the Korban Omer itself, the barley offering, was brought in the Beis HaMikdash. This day is described by the Torah as Mimachras HaShabbos, the day after Shabbos. According to the Gemara, though, the word Shabbos here was proven by Chazal to refer to the first day of Pesach. And the Omer was thus brought on the next day, the 16th of Nisan. So Machras HaShabbos means the day after Pesach. Because Yom Tov is also called Shabbos. This is in contrast to the Tzdukim and the Karaites, the Karoim, who interpreted the word Shabbos as referring to Shabbos itself, whenever it falls out during Pesach. For example, let's say Pesach started on Monday. Then they would wait until Shabbos, and then on Sunday, and part of the Christian theology came out of this too, Easter, the Sunday, it had to do with this machlokas. The Rambam summarizes the position of Chazal and offers an additional proof based on a pasuk in Sefer Yoshua. So, Omer Zeh, V'kolkach lama, why do we need all this? There were Jews who left the community of Israel during Bayis Sheni. He's talking about the Tzdukim. Shabbos Breishis. That the Shabbos there doesn't refer to the first day of Pesach, for the Shabbos itself. But the Chachamim from Torah Shabbat Peh, Mesora, mouth to mouth from Moshe Rabbeinu, Sheino Shabbos Ela Yontif. That when it says Machras Shabbos, it refers to Pesach. The Chen wrote Tamid Anavim Basanhedim b'chol dor v'dor. This is how the Nevi'im and the Son in every generation understood it. Shayu menifin es ha'omer b'shishasar b'nisan ben b'chol ben b'Shabbos. That means if Shabbos was Friday, then they would waive and they would actually cut the Minchas Omer on Shabbos. Therefore, the Chodosh could not be eaten until that day. Then it says in Yoshua, Vayochlu me'avura aretz, the Klal Yisrael finally ate from the grain of Eretz Yisrael, mimachras ha-Pesach, matzos v'kalui be'etzem hayom hazeh. Now, in Tomer Shoyso ha-Pesach b'Shabbos era, you're going to tell me that Pesach that year was on Shabbos, k'mosh shedimu atipshim, like the way these fools that stukim, heich, tola kosov hetrach lasom l'chodesh, b'dover she'eno ikra v'lo asiba lo nikra nikra. It's just coincidence that happened on Shabbos? No, the Torah meant that it follows the day of Pesach, like it says it. It says, Mimachras ha-Pesach. Machras ha-Tola davar Mimachras ha-Pesach. Hadavar borur, Shemachras ha-Pesach hi ha'ila. That is the cause. Hamateres is ha-Chodosh. Vein mashgichin aleza yomu mimei ha-Shabbat. It has nothing to do with what day of the week is it. So according to the Rambam, one can prove that Chazal were correct, because the pasuk in Yoshua states that the Jewish people, shortly after they came in, because they came in on the 10th of Nisan, ate the new grain, which is permitted on the day that the Korban Omer was brought, on the day after the first day of Pesach. Now, if the Korban Omer is brought on the day after Shabbos, like the Tzdukim, then it's illogical for the pasuk to refer to the day after Pesach, since that would change every year, depending on which date on the calendar Shabbos falls out. Rather, it stands to reason that it's dependent on a specific calendar date that is referred to as Shabbos, and the first day of Pesach seems to be its most logical. Now, why do we have this mitzvah of counting? So the Shibbolei HaLeket, who was a Rishon, suggests two different rationalities. In fact, the whole Yontef of Shavuos is Tolui not in Kiddush HaChodesh, 50 days, the 50th day after the second day of Pesach, that's when Shavuos is. All of the Yomim Tovim are told in Kiddush HaChodesh of that month. Lefi, shekesh nishtabasru Yisrael, let's say Mitzrayim, when Klal Yisrael were given the good news that they were going to leave Egypt, they were told that they were going to get the Torah 50 days. Ta'avdun, with a nun sofit, et alokim al harazeh. Hare anun shel ta'avdun yitera. You don't need the nun. It could have said ta'avdu et alokim. What's this extra nun? Shetekabel satoira. The Yisrael Merov on the 50th day. Leketz chamishim yom tavdun es alokim shetekabel satoira. The Yisrael Merov chibayu moine b'chol yom v'yom. V'oimrim harei over yom echad yom sheni. They would like count how many days till a person's going to go on a trip. There's one day, 2 day, 3 day. V'chein kulam. Shayanir beinem is kizman aruch. They saw it in their eyes as a long time. Mitochi batana gdola, the great love that they were anxious to receive the Torah. Lachein hasfir nikvas l'doros. So that's what the Shibbolei HaLeket says. Uv'tamim Rav Yehuda Chassid Zatzal. Rav Yehuda Chassid was a Rishon a little bit after Rashi, Motzati, who lived in Worms. This is spring. This is harvest season. Everyone's going to be out in the fields. Who's going to let people know, Kiddush HaChodesh Iyar happened on such and such day? Or when the new moon for Sivan was seen, so that is Iyar a 29-day month or a 30-day month? So for simplicity's sake, the Torah said just count 50 days, then it's Shavuos. So according to Shibbolei Aleket, the first reason for counting is to demonstrate that we are eagerly anticipating the receiving of the Torah, just as our ancestors did after leaving Egypt. I'm reading the footnote. According to this reason that we are counting in anticipation of receiving the Torah, one might think that it would be better to count down the days until Shavuos, 50, 49, 48, rather than counting up. The question is well known. Many answers are given, including the notion of counting up, symbolizing that we are ascending the ladder of spirituality during this period of time. Another point that is not clear according to this reason is why Sefirat Ha Omer is connected specifically to the bringing of the barley for the Korban Omer. One explanation given is that barley represents animal food, because I said the Minchas Omer is brought from barley, while the Shtei Alechem offered on Shavuos is from wheat, which is human food. And that's why I always say, if you look at the Sidurim by Sfira, that it says Hoid Shebahoid, Hoid Shebenetzach. That means they divide each week into one of the Spheros, like Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, and then each day of that 7-day cycle is Chesed Shebechesed, Gvura Shebechesed. Tonight is Tiferes Shebechesed. These are midos that we are supposed to refine ourselves to be better human beings. So we go from the oimer, which is barley, animal food, because we came out of Mitzrayim, but we were animals in terms of our midos and we were on the 49th level of Tumah. Then we built ourselves up day after day, refining our midos, refining our attributes, until finally we could eat human food, which is by a korban, the Shtei Alechem. Okay, so while the second reason is a practical one to ensure that even those individuals who would not otherwise know when Rosh Chodesh was due to their being away from the main population centers would be able to celebrate Shavuos. Now, is Sefirat Ha Omer today d'oraisa or d'rabbanan? So it seems from the psuki mentioned above that the mitzvah of counting the Omer is directly connected to the mitzvah of bringing the Korban Omer to the Beis HaMikdash, which is why they take place on the same day. What then should be the status of the mitzvah of Sefirat Ha Omer nowadays, when the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed, we don't bring the Korban Omer? Should the mitzvah still be d'oraisa, or might it only be d'rabbanan? It seems from many Rishonim, including Tosfos, that the mitzvah is only d'rabbanan. Says Tosfos and Menachos, Nira de besovek hashecha yachol levarich. Let's say you're not sure exactly whether it's nightfall or not, because you have to make the sphere at nightfall. You're allowed to bench because it's a suffix d'rabbanan. He was dealing with the issue, could you count sphere during Ben Hashmoshes, which is not for sure night, which we'll go into a little later. The Rambam, on the other hand, maintains that the mitzvah of counting sphere is d'oraisa even nowadays. Says in Hilchos Tmidim Umusafin, mitzvah sasei lispor shava shabbos tmimois miyom avos omer, mitzvah zu kol ish mi Yisrael v'chol makom v'chol zman. So the Rambam says that it's a d'oraisa. However, the Beis Yosef on Orach Chaim in the tour rules in accordance with Tosfos, and the majority of Rishonim that the mitzvah is d'rabbanan. V'masha kosati le'el b'shem Aran, sh'rov ha'mefarshim maskimim d'Sefirat Ha Omer achshav ein ela midrabbanan ba'alma. Havisfeika b'midi d'rabbanan l'kula v'ein ha'chozer mavarech. The Beis Yosef is discussing the case where one has already recited the bracha on Sefirat Ha Omer, but your kavanah was to count the wrong day. You thought it was day 4, but it was really day 5. And then he realizes his mistake and counts the correct day. Although the Torah quotes the Rav Yah, who holds that one has not fulfilled the mitzvah, since the bracha was recited with improper intent, the Beis Yosef says that since most commentaries hold that the mitzvah sphere is only d'rabbanan, one should be lenient and not recite the bracha again, due to the rule of Safek brachos lahakil. If it was d'oraisa, he would make you do it again. So somebody asks you, is sphere bisman hazeh Midrabanan, Midoraisa, you say it's machlokes Rishonim. The Rambam says it's Midoraisa. Most of the other Rishonim say it's Drabanan. The proper time for counting. What is considered the proper time for counting Sefirat Ha Omer? So as opposed to the Korban Omer, which of course, Korbanos are only brought in the daytime, the counting of the Omer is performed at night. Like it says in Masechta Menachos, Samech Vav Amud Aleph, Yom Aviachem Tispru. So Yachol Yik Tzurva, what? Maybe you harvest and bring it. The Emasai Sheyir Tzei Yispor. And maybe whenever you want to count, you can count. Talmud Loimar, Me'achel Charmesh B'Kamat Tachel Yispor. No, you start counting in the beginning of the harvest. Now, Me'achel Charmesh Tachel Yispor, Yachol Yik Tzurva, maybe you should start counting right after you harvest. The Emasai Sheyir Tzei, and maybe then you can bring the Korban Omer whenever you want, even at night. No, it's got to be done in the day. Well, so maybe you harvest and count and do everything by Yom. So no. To have complete days, you're never going to have Tmimos unless you started the count from the night. Because Vayera, Vayvoker. The day starts at the night. So if you count it in the middle of the day, you would not have Tmimos. And the Shulchan Aruch rules, Beleil Sheni, Achar Tfilos Arvis, Matchil Lispar Omer. Right? After Ma'ariv, on the second night of Pesach, you start counting. You can count all night, even if you didn't do it in the beginning of the night, you can count all night. The Bir Halacha, Chafetz Chaim notes, though, that one may not count the Omer immediately after it gets dark, prior to reciting Ma'ariv. It means, let's say it gets dark, maybe you have Avim, you should make the bracha before Ma'ariv. No. Ma'ariv is recited before counting the Omer. Either because the custom in earlier times was to daven Ma'ariv before it was totally dark, and we continue the custom, or that means we continue to always have Ma'ariv before Sefira, because of that, or because of the principle of Tadir V'Sheina Tadir Tadir Koidim, which means we recite things that are done more frequently, in this case being Shemana Esrei, which we do every day. We don't recite Sefirat Ha Omer every day. So Ma'ariv should be said before Sefira. Kosev say more tzia. The time the soifen achrat tefila mishum the bedoros rishon hayim minhag lispal arvis kodim halayla. In earlier times, they would start davening Ma'ariv before nightfall. The common practice was to follow the opinion of Rabbeinu Tam concerning nightfall being 72 minutes after sunset. However, since it would be difficult to daven that late because they had no electricity, they recited Ma'ariv before nightfall, and would then count the Omer immediately thereafter. And in their times, when Ma'ariv ended, it went right when the beginning of night. He brings us the reason of Tadir as to why Ma'ariv should be recited first. The first consideration, my Shabir Alecha, is not always relevant today, when many minyanim do daven Ma'ariv after nightfall, and those that daven before nightfall may finish before nightfall as well, such that one ideally not count then in any case, as we will discuss in the next section. We're talking by Tseis. However, the second consideration is relevant today, the issue of Tadir. Therefore, Rav Yosef Tzvi Rimon, right? He's the Morda Asra by Machon Lev, major figure in the religious Zionist world in Eretz Yisrael. He writes based on the Igros Moshe that one who davens Ma'ariv at a later minyan should still count Sefira at the end of the davening and not at the beginning of the night. He says you should daven Ma'ariv first. You should always do the more frequent mitzvah or tefillah first. Even if he davens in a late Ma'ariv minyan, 11 o'clock at night, he shouldn't say Sefira earlier. He should still do it after Ma'ariv. Imzeu minyan kavua. As long as it's a minyan kavua. L'maisa gamishim is probably minyan meuchar she'ena kavua. Let's say he went to a sheva brachas and it's not a minyan kavua and they daven Ma'ariv there. Still yispor matzibur. V'yas simin o tizkors la'atzmo b'tchilas ha'erev k'dei shlo yishkach. He should make some kind of siman that he shouldn't forget Sefira. So Rav Rimon explains, although Rav Moshe and other poskim refer to a fixed minyan, in practice, one should count at the end of Ma'ariv even if one plans on davening with an ad hoc minyan. Since it's important to count the Sefira as part of a congregation based on the shlah. And plus otherwise people may forget to count if they daven on their own, says the Shevet HaLevi Rav Wozner. As well as the fact that one who counts earlier may forget that he did so and proceed to count the Omer again with a bracha after Ma'ariv, and it's a bracha she'eina tzricha.
I don't understand the footnote. The footnote suggests that Rav Moshe says that if it's not a minyan kavua, you don't wait. But it's clearly, he says, l'maisa, even in a minyan that's not kavua, you should wait to count with the tzibur. That's the last.
No, because we don't have the full quote of Rav Moshe, because the quote from Rav Moshe is in zeu minyan kavua. Period. So Rav Rimon added that. L'maisa gamishim mispal b'minyan muchar.
Oh, I see. That's not Rav Moshe.
That's not Rav Moshe.
All right, I'll go look it up later.
Yeah,
okay,
no,
thank you.
No, that's not Rav Moshe, and that's the issue. But he says l'maisa. He brings other people, the Chok Yaakov and the Shevet HaLevi, that you should do it as well, even in your ad hoc minyanim. I'm not sure Rav Moshe addressed it. It seems like Rav Moshe said if you're part of a regular minyan. Yeah, we have to look that up. But that is L'maisa Gamisha Mispal Minyan Mucha. That's not Rav Moshe. That's Rav Tzvi Rimon. Now, what about Ben Hashmashos? Is it permitted to count the Omer during Ben Hashmashos, which is halachically considered a period of suffix as to whether it's day or night? That's Ben Hashmashos. It's suffix Yom, suffix Laila. This question is subject to a dispute among the Rishonim. The basis for it is whether we hold that Sefira nowadays is Deraisa D'Rabbanan. If it's Deraisa, then we should be Machmir in case of uncertainty. While if it's only D'Rabbanan, then we may be lenient in such cases. We saw above that according to Tosfos, one may indeed count the Omer during Ben Hashmashos because we hold that Sefira nowadays is only D'Rabbanan. The Mishnah Berurah suggests that in theory, this should be the halacha. But it is in practice recommended not to place oneself in a situation of suffix if it can be avoided. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Minadin, hayav shalakili spor mishetechshach. Of course, he says, since most of the Rishonim hold that Sefira is Drabanan, you should be able to count even before Tzeisa Koichavim. The Ben Hashmashos who suffix Laila, Vazlinan lekula b'suffix Drabanan b'Sefira b'zman hazeh, shehu min Drabanan lerova poskim, ela b'kol makom, ein anochon lachnis atzmo l'suffix lechatchila. Ula'achya medagdikim mamtinim ad Tzeisa Koichavim. Try to wait until it says, shehu b'vaday Laila. So that's an important piece of halacha that if you do it, b'di'eved you're yotzei. So as a result, in cases where one does count during Ben Hashmashos, one may recite a bracha, as stated Rav Ovadia Yosef. Nimtzanu l'meidim she mitzvah Rabbanan shehuter la'asos Ben Hashmashos mitam safik Rabbanan l'kula. Havale asofik kavadai. It's treated as a certainty, and therefore you can make a bracha. Now, although we have seen that there's room for leniency to count Sefira inside a bracha during Ben Hashmashos when needed, one is not allowed to count prior to Shkia, and one would not fulfill his obligation at all. Shabbos. Like people are makabel Shabbos Friday, even before Shkia, ein lispor kodem Shkia. This concept that, I brought Shabbos in, so the day is there. No, you got to wait until Shkia. It should be noted there are some opinions that hold that in a case where the Omer is being counted by a congregation reciting Ma'ariv early before Shkia, one may count with him without a bracha if one is concerned that one may forget to count later. This is the interpretation given to the ruling of Shulchan Aruch by some Achronim, citing the Bir Halacha there, such as Levush and Eliyahu Rabbah. However, other Achronim interpret the Shulchan Aruch differently, as explained by the Mishnah Murad there. So there's this issue where some Rabbanim in Shul say, oh, count without a bracha, because maybe you'll forget. But most practice is, if you're davening early, you wait until it says and make the bracha at that time. One who did not count at night, let's say you missed Sefirat Ha Omer. What is the halacha if one did not count the Omer all night? May one count the following day? This question is subject to a dispute among the Rishonim. We assume that the halacha should be the same as that concerning whether harvesting for the Korban HaOmer, which was done at night, according to Morag Menachah, was allowed to be done the next day if necessary. So the harvesting of the Omer was also done at night. So let's say they forgot to do it at night. So the Gemara has a diyun whether you can do it the next day. However, they dispute whether actually harvesting is indeed permitted the following day. According to the Bahag, the Baal Halachas Kedolos, one may do so the next day based on the Mishnah Menachos. We're talking about harvesting. Or Rabbeinu Tam holds that one may not, based on the Mishnah Megillah. The Beis Yosef, in his commentary on the Tur, brings both opinions. Cause of Baal Halachas Kedolos, Shem Shakach Levar Kol Halayla, Sheyisper Bayom. So the Bahag, the Beis Yosef says, based on the Bahag's opinion, that you were allowed to harvest the Minchas Omer in the daytime, so that if you forgot to make the Sefirat Ha Omer at night, you spor biyom, you can count in the day. Kein kosva toisus perak Rabbi Shmuel b'Shmuel. The kosva shekein nira. Midisnanim menachos mitzvos b'layla liktzor. The mitzvah, the primary mitzvah, is to harvest at night. The mitzvah b'yom kosher. Aval nir Rabbeinu Tam iker idich stama. Rabbeinu Tam has another stam mishnah in Megillah. Kol halayla kosher l'ktzir sa'omer. V'daikina mina, and we deduce from that language, diktani laila dumidiyom, ma diyom b'layla lo, right? Things that you do in the daytime, you're not allowed to do at night, like shaking the lulav. So after laila, things that you're supposed to do at night, bayom lo. So machlokes Bahag Rabbeinu Tam. So, but the majority of Rishonim hold like the Bahag, who the Rosh, the Ran, the Mordechai. Nevertheless, the Shulchan Aruch presents a middle position as a compromise, that one may still count. We're talking about the next day, if you missed the night before, but you may not recite a bracha. Shachach v'lo birach kol halayla yispor b'yom below bracha. And the Mishnah Berurah adds that although he missed one night, if he counts during the day, he may continue to count with a bracha on the subsequent nights. And it's not considered as if he missed a day entirely. Says the Mishnah Berurah, means if a person missed a night and he did the count in the day without a bracha, right? He's allowed to continue counting with a bracha. And it's not like somebody who missed a whole day, a 24-hour day, didn't do any count. There, he does not count with the bracha, which we will deal with in the next segment. So for this reason, some have the custom of announcing the Sefira count after Shachris each morning without a bracha to fulfill the obligation of those who may have forgotten to count the previous night. The Yalkut Yosef mentions this minig. Minig nachon b'Yushalayim lispor omer v'ves hakneses b'Shachris b'li bracha. Shemiyesh misha shachach lispor b'layla yispor b'Shachris v'yoylo. Shemikan alama yispor b'bracha. It allowed him to continue doing it. By the way, why are we allowed to continue? Look at the footnote. Because it's a sveka, a double suffix. Perhaps the halacha is that one may count during the day, like the Bahag. And even if one may not count during the day, Many poskim hold that one may count on succeeding days even if one missed a day completely. So because of the Sveika, that's why you can continue to count even with a bracha. Now, what about if a person missed a night and a day? What is the halacha if one did not count at night or the following day? So in this case, one has certainly missed out on fulfilling the mitzvah of counting for that day. But does that mean that one cannot complete the rest of the mitzvah sefira on all subsequent days as well? So regarding this question, the Bahag, cited by Tosfos, even though the Bahag was more lenient in the psak that we just discussed regarding if you miss at night, you can do it in a day, here he's more stringent and holds that one may no longer count the rest of the period of Sefirat Ha Omer. Od Pasak Behilchos Gedolah says Tosfos, this is Menachos Samech Vav. Shim Hifsik Yom Echad V'lo Sofar. He missed one day. Shuv Eino Sofer. Mishum Deboy Tmimois. The count has to be complete. And says Tosfos V'tei Gedolahu. This is a big wonder. V'lo Yitochen. He thinks it's not correct. So the Sefer HaChinuch tries to explain the logic of the Bahag as being that the entire count of 49 days is considered one mitzvah, according to the Bahag. And thus, when one misses one day, the count's not complete. But the Chinuch also agrees that should not be the halacha. The Yesha Amru, Shemisha Shachach V'lo Mona Yom Echad, Shein Yachol Limnos Oid Ba'is Shana. It can't count anymore. Fi Shekula Mitzvah Chasi. Kevan Shachach Men Yom Echad, it's all nullified. However, our leaders of our generation, the chinuch was a rishon. So he says our leaders did not accept that svar. He should say, you should say, yesterday was whatever the number was. And he continues to count. Now, again, we're going to see that the first opinion of the Bahag is he can't count at all, with a bracha, without a bracha, no counting. Now that the Chinuch says, he can continue counting, we'll see, does that mean with a bracha or not a bracha? So let's hold on. Most other Rishonim also reject the Bahag, including the cited by the Rosh, who explains the reason why everybody opposes that. Lord Kosov Balalachos Gedolah Shem Hifsik Yom Echad V'lo Sofar Shavenu Sofer. Debin in Tmimus. Ve'ein nir l'ri. D'chol laila v'laila mitzvah f'nei atzmahi. Not like the Bahag, who said that counting all the 49 days is the mitzvah. They say, no, each night is a different mitzvah. As opposed to the Bahag, who seems to have held that the entire Sefira count is one mitzvah. The explains that the count each day is a separate mitzvah. And one may fulfill the rest of the count even if one day was missed. Look at the footnote. This is the way that the Bahag's opinion is explained by the Sefer HaChinuch and traditionally understand. However, Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, Zal, who was the Rosh Hashiva in Gush, cited by Rav Rimon, suggests that the Bahag holds that each day constitutes a separate mitzvah, like Tosfos, but one cannot fulfill each day's mitzvah of Sefirat Ha Omer unless the sequence is complete and the days beforehand were counted properly. Rav Rimon notes that this understanding also leads to an important lesson on the spiritual level, that one cannot jump stages while seeking spiritual growth. Rather, one must proceed one stage at a time.
Would the Re and the Rush agree that if he missed more than one day, that he can't count? I mean, is this the dispute with the Bahag only for one day, or would they agree if it's, let's say, he missed 2 days, that it's all over?
I think right now it's one day in a Chanami. I think right now and you see they had this formulation where we'll see, this is not our halacha, we'll see. But this is how it's been formulated. Right. Remember, he says something like emesh. What did I say? Yeah, emesh hayukach below bracha. You say yesterday was such and such a day, and that's sort of so the question you're asking. Well, if you missed 2 days, could you say, the 2 days ago was this, and yesterday was this? Would they hold that would be acceptable? I'm not sure it's clear yet.
Yeah.
what they would
Okay.
say.
Yeah, okay.
So what happens now is the Trumas Hadesh and another Rishon adopts a compromise approach. If one definitely did not count for the entire day, he may no longer count with a bracha, which is in deference to the opinion of the Bahag, who said you shouldn't count at all. So it implies that the Re and the Rosh held you counted with a bracha. So the Trumas Hadeshin says, well, to be choishish for the Bahag, you can count, but without a bracha. Though he should count without a bracha, right, based upon the opinion of most Rishonim. If he's unsure if he forgot or not, then he may continue to count with a bracha. So that's an important piece. Let's say you're mesupik whether you counted yesterday. So then the Rishonim hold you can continue counting with a bracha. It's only if you know vadai that you didn't count, that you missed a day, then you continue counting but without a bracha. Says the Trumas Hadeshin, im sofek le'echad, im sofar laila achasoila. Somebody's in doubt. Did he count or not count? One night. Heich yasa mikan ve'elech. Yispor bebracha olo. Should he count with a bracha? Tshuva. Yira the yispor bebracha mikan v'hala because it's a sofek. Afilim lo niskar sofek ad laila shniya. Even he doesn't remember. He remembers the doubt the next night. Afal pichein sofer bebracha mitoch sofek. Vavagad v'vadei shachach yom echad. But if you vadai forgot one day, no yagin kabbalah lachos k'toiles, the cost of shachach yom echad shovena sofer peirush bebracha. The Trumas Hadeshin said, doesn't mean not count with a bracha. So that he's learning in the Bahag that even the Bahag said you could count but without a bracha. And the Shulchan Aruch ends up pasking like the Trumas Hadeshin, which is why our halacha is like it is. Im shachach levarch be'echad ma'yomim. Ben Yom Rishon, Ben Mishar Yom, whether it was the first day or the other days, Soifer B'Shar Yomim below bracha. You can continue to count, but no bracha. Aval im hu mesupik im dilid yochem v'lo sofar. He's in doubt whether he missed the day. So that further on, Yisfor B'Shar Yom Osa bracha. You can continue counting with a bracha. The Mishnah Berurah explains a number of other details about this halacha, and also offers the reason for the ruling of the second case in the Shulchan Aruch, that if you were mesupik, you can continue counting. Shachach levarech hu adin im noidilo she'esmol to'ab b'min. Let's say somebody told him that yesterday when he counted it was wrong. The sofer Sefirat Ha Omer. Dino k'mo shelo sofer klal. So that's being told that you counted wrong is like you didn't count. So then as long as you count the next day with the right one, you can continue the count. Then he comments on below bracha. But what you should do, if you're one of these unfortunate people who forgot a whole day, and now you're counting out a bracha, you should hear the bracha from the shliach tzibur and say amen. Or let's say the person standing next to you. Answer amen, and then count. Then yispor b'shar yomim b'vracha. Remember, we said if it's a safek, whether you forgot, you can continue with a bracha. The ikas fake sveka. Shema lo dilei klal. One side of the safek is maybe he didn't skip. V'imtim shlomo should dileg. Shema lo hakosim poskim d'chol yomu mitzvah v'nei atzma. Remember, some of the Rishonim hold each day is it's the mitzvah is on its own. It's a mitzvah, so we want to capture that. There's the same thing by other cases. If you forgot something and machmas sofik, if one forgot to count at night as well as the next day, and only remember during Bein HaShmoshes, so let's say you remember the next day, but it's already after Shkia. May he still count at that time? So, for example, it's Shkia, it's after Shkia, it's Bein HaShmoshes, and you quickly say you count without a bracha the day that you missed. Will that keep you in the count?
Halacha l'maisa, because that happens. Sometimes you go to shul,
right?
You know, and the shows that say Sefirat Ha Omer early and start tefillah Rabbi Kesselman says Sefirat Ha Omer after Marav, before Tzesach HaKochavim. That's how he holds. And so, what if you remember at that point, before nightfall, before it stars out?
Right. So that's what we're at. That's what we're asking now. May still count at that time, and then continue counting during the rest of the sphere with a bracha. This is machlokes achronim. According to Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, one may not continue counting with a bracha. Hasharei tshuva nistapek. Hasharei tshuva was not sure. B'misha shachach lispar omer b'layla. He didn't count properly the night before. V'niskar v'safra ben hashmoshes shel yom hamachros. He only remembered the next ben hashmoshes. Shu safek yom shelafanav, which is a safek whether it's the day before or the night. So if he quickly counts, can he continue counting with the bracha? The Sha'alti Lemoran, right? This, whoever's writing here, the Madane Shlomo, asked for Shlomo Zalman, Ketzad Linog. He said not to. The reason to be lenient is that when you remembered, we went through the Sveik Sveika. Now we have to be concerned that it's already the next day, and your count you missed a whole day. On the other hand, the Yalkut Yosef and the other poskim rule that one may continue to count with a bracha in this case.
I mean, look at footnote 15, where it's an interesting footnote.
See, however, Alicha Shlomo, where Shlomo Zalman is quoted as saying that one may in fact continue to count with a bracha in this case. And also, the Piskei Tshuva list of other achronim that hold this way. The reason that since most Rishonim hold that one may continue to count with a bracha, even if one did not count for an entire day, any suffix, even one such as this one, the Ben Hashmoshes may still be part of the previous day, and thus one did count in time, is sufficient to continue counting with a bracha, and would not be concerned with the opinion of the Bahag. So there are other poskim, along with the Yalkut Yosef, against Rosh Shlomo Zalman, that say if you remember Ben Hashmoshes, you can continue counting with a bracha.
Apparently, Rosh Shlomo Zalman says that.
So, and even in the Halicha Shloimo, Rosh Shlomo Zalman said it as well, exactly. So, he remembers for sure that he had not counted the day before. He didn't remember during the day. So Yispor miyad asfir shelemesh, b'li bracha. He should say, quickly count the day. And then he can continue the normal count. He should make sure that he should wait until it says, right? Because if it's going to be against himself if he again does it Ben Hashmoshes. Because Ben Hashmoshes, now when he's counting, he's treating it as the day before. So he should never count Sfira, if he ever did that, prior to Tzesach HaKochavim. Otherwise, he would be negating what he did, because by now making the bracha Ben Hashmoshes, he's treating it as the day before. So how could you ever make L'chatchila, the Sefirat Ha Omer Ben Hashmoshes? We're assuming that's the next day. So so we know, particularly Motzei Shabbos, the Rabbeinu Tam Ben Hashmoshes is 72 minutes. Our Ben Hashmoshes is much less. It's 13 minutes, at least. Could be longer. It's got to be at least 13 minutes. If he remembered after the first 13 minutes, now let's say he's one of those people who doesn't end Shabbos until Rabbeinu Tam Ben Hashmoshes, which is he's got to wait 72 minutes after Shkia. He cannot benefit Sefirat Ha Omer with that. Ein letzarf b'zeh svaros Rabbeinu Tam v'siyatu la'arshos l'lispor mikan ve'elech b'bracha. El mikan ve'elech lispor below bracha shesofik brachas la'akel. So you have some time. Ben Hashmoshes got to be within the first 13 minutes. Although we have seen there is some room to continue to count the Omer with a bracha, even where one forgot to count at night. The Chidon Sefer known as Avodas HaKodesh writes that in general one should be careful not to forget Sefirat Ha Omer, because if he misses his entire day, his brachos recited until that point on the previous nights might then be considered to have been levatola retroactively. Let's just read the footnotes here. The reference to our Ben Hashmoshes is based on the fact that the widespread custom today is to follow the opinion of the Gaonim and the Vilna Gaon. He shows you where it is, the Bir Agra, that Ben Hashmoshes begins immediately after sunset, means after Shkia, and lasts for about 13 minutes. Defined as the time it takes you to walk 3/4 of a mil, whereas a mil is defined as the distance one can walk within 18 minutes. Though some are more stringent. According to Rabbeinu Tam, Ben Hashmoshes did not begin until about an hour after sunset. Thus, the Yalkut Yosef is saying that even one is machmer after Shabbos to wait until Rabbeinu Tam's Ben Hashmoshes to declare Shabbos as being over 72 minutes. With regard to other issues, such as this, you can't rely on the opinion to be lenient regarding making this statement of Svira within the Ben Hashmoshes, since we generally follow the Gaonim and the Vilna Gaon. Therefore, one may only be lenient to continue counting if one recited the previous day during the 13.5 minutes after sunset. That's the explanation. Now, why would the previous brachas be considered levatola? The Ritvan Chulin may disagree with this, since he writes that one who washes natilas yadayim before eating bread and then decides not to eat bread anymore before reciting the bracha of Hamotzi has done nothing wrong. And there's no obligation to eat bread in order to prevent his bracha on washing from bringing a bracha la'atola. He explains that once he washed his hands, the period of the bracha has been completed. And as long as at that time he intended to eat bread, there's no problem. You change your mind and that's it. On the other hand, one could argue that in that case, Natilas Yadayim is already complete. Whereas here, the complete fulfillment of the mitzvah is dependent upon one's counting the Sefira every other night afterwards. And we must still be concerned in the future for a potential bracha levatala if one misses another night. Very fascinating svara regarding the comparison to Natilas Yadayim. Izdar's v'yasa simonim, person should always set an alarm on his phone. Let's say when he's not with the tzibur, the after the yishkach gam b'yom v'lo yichal od lispor b'bracha. Mafreya you call a bracha milela shavru would be bracha levatala. Nevertheless, even if one knows that he will not be able to complete the Sefira count, let's say a person knows he's going to be in surgery and he's going to be like a major surgery where he's going to be intubated and on, medicine that keeps him in a coma for 2 days. And you started the Sefira, and a week from now, you need to have that surgery. So maybe, what's the din? So even if one knows they will not be able to complete the Sefira count, it's permitted for him to count with a bracha until that time, as Rul Bar Shlomo Zalman. Since at the time that he's counting, he's acting entirely according to the expectations of the halacha. He says, Misha atid lavoni tuach, vayedei kach, yafsid b'vaday sfiras yom echad or yoter, mutar lo lahaskil ispor bevracha kol od yuchal. He can begin the count. Ve'ein ze inyan lemachnis atzmo levracha levatala. We don't have to worry about a bracha levatala. Kivan shu oisa achshav masha mutar lalav. Gam alay yishtane matzav. We never know. Maybe gam yuchal gam ligmor sfira. Okay. What about Sefirat Ha Omer for noshim, for women? According to nearly all opinions, Sefirat Ha Omer is considered a mitzvah asay shazman grama, a time-bound mitzvah, since it's performed at a specific period during the year and is performed in the evening. Look at the footnote. The lone opinion that holds Sefirat Ha Omer is not a time-bound mitzvah is the famous Ramban, who lists Sefirat Ha Omer together with other mitzvahs that are not time-bound. No, they don't give the opinion. I learned this with Tzvika yesterday. So next week we'll go over that Ramban. It's very interesting. Since women are generally exempt from fulfilling time-bound mitzvahs, Kiddushin 29a, women are also exempt from counting the Omer. However, women should be permitted to fulfill the mitzvah should they so desire. Nevertheless, there's a famous machlokes whether women may recite a bracha on a time-bound mitzvah. According to Shulchan Aruch, mentioned in the context of women reciting a bracha upon listening to the shofar, women may not recite a bracha, which is a Sephardic custom. Well, according to Ramah, women may recite a bracha, which is the Ashkenazi custom. And this, of course, is the same regarding lulav and any mitzvah sasei shazman grama that technically women are potter from, but they choose to do it. So they're allowed to do it. The only question is, can they make the bracha asher kedushonim mitzvos of tzivon? So the Sfardim tell their women, you can do the mitzvah, but you can't make the bracha. Ashkenazic women make the bracha. And afal pish and noshim pturos yicholos litkoa. So even though women are potter, they can blow. Aval ein mavarchos v'lo yivarchun lahen. They don't recite a bracha, and someone else does not have to recite a bracha on their behalf. The Ramah v'aminik shanoshim mavarchos al mitzvah sasei shazman grama. Al kain gam kan mavarchos latzman. This is by sphere. This is by shofar. When it comes to Sefirat Ha Omer, there's an additional question to address. Is an Ashkenazi woman permitted to begin reciting a bracha daily if she may potentially forget to count one night? At first glance, one might argue, then since we explained above that men are permitted to recite a bracha despite the possibility that they may miss a day, and even if they know that they will miss a day, according to Rav Shlomo Zalman, like we learned, the halacha for women should be exactly the same. But on the other hand, since women are not mechuyev, they're not obligated in the mitzvah, perhaps we should say that it is more appropriate not to take a chance. Moreover, perhaps there's also more of a chance that women will forget than men, since most women do not attend minyan daily. And remember, you can see that a lot of the dinim of Svira are connected. They feel that if you're in a minyan kavua, you're not going to forget. But if you didn't daven in a minyan and you're by a yachid, you're more prone to forget. And since women are not involved in minyanim, maybe they shouldn't start. The Magen Avram writes that although women are technically exempt from the mitzvah, they have nevertheless accepted upon themselves to fulfill it. This would seem to imply that he holds that they may recite a bracha as well. Says the Magen Avram, Noshim Peturos Mesfira, Avi Mitzvah Sasei Shazman Grama. Umir Kvar Shavino Alai Chayva. But the women accepted it. And so this statement of the Magen Avram is quoted by the later Achronim, the Be'er Heitev, the Chok Yaakov, and the Mishnah Berurah. However, the Mishnah Berurah then notes that in his time, and by the way, the Aruch HaShulchan also states that women are accustomed to count Sfir with a bracha. He doesn't reference the Magen Avram. The Sharat Zion comments that the Pri Chodesh Chai Adam also did not mention any custom of women to count, in contrast to Magen Avram. So what did the Mishnah Berurah note? That in his time, most women did not count the Omer. And as that according to the Sefer Shulchan Shlomo, even if they do count, they should not recite a bracha, since they will likely miss a night, and most do not understand the meaning of the words, thus rendering the count meaningless. Wow. Obviously, things have changed.
Yes, that wouldn't work today, that reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Things
Yeah,
have changed.
lucky my kids are not listening to this one.
No, but listen, things have changed. The Mishnah Berurah would agree. Mishnah Berurah, that's why he permitted and encouraged the founding of the
Beis Yaakov.
Beis Yaakov movement, because he understood that they needed to be taught. I'm sure that the Mishnah Berurah would completely write differently today. Absolutely, for sure.
I'm surprised they quote this whole thing here, but it's okay.
You know what? I think it's very valuable because it shows that halacha is dynamic. And even the Mishnah, I've heard the Minchas Usher of Usher Weiss disagree with the Mishnah Berurah on certain issues. I mean, it used to be heresy. Mishnah Berurah was the final psak in our growing up, but he was.
If you
I'm
look
sure
at
the Mishnah,
the,
huh?
I'm sorry. If you look at the Dirshu version of the Mishnah Berurah, which is very interesting, you'll find many cases where they quote Achronim that disagree because of recent developments.
Right,
I
right.
suspect
So
this will
I
be
think
one of
it's
them.
health. I actually think it's a healthy thing that they're doing this. So it says in our times, it seems that things have changed significantly from the times of the Mishnah Berurah. First, it would seem that many women do count the Omer today, similar to the custom reported by the Magen Avram. Second, the second consideration of the Shulchan Shlomo, that most women do not know the meaning of their words, is no longer the case. For this reason, poskim such as the Stipler of Yaakov Yisrael Kanievsky allow Ashkenazi women to count and presumably recite a bracha. The Stipler himself reminded his wife and other household members to count. One could also argue, I'm reading the footnote, one could also argue that regard to the concern that women will miss the night in our times, since there are so many ways to receive reminders to count the Omer, such as alarms, emails, right? The OU sends out automatic reminders and the like. It's also less of a problem than it was in the time when women wished to count. So the Orchas Rabbeinu, which it says Beves Morain Rabbeinu, the Stipler, Safra Nashim Sfiras Ha Omer. Morain Rabbeinu Yakol Laila Maskilu Zogos Rabbanis allows the Rebbe Stipler would remind his wife of Noisav and his daughters, of Noisav and the granddaughters. She is true. The Yalkut, that's the father of Kanievsky. The Yalkut Yosef takes a different approach, pointing out that aside from the rule that Sephardic women should not recite a bracha on time on mitzvahs, according to Mishloka tradition, women should not count at all. It says Noshim P'tus Mitzvahs Sfiras Ha Omer. Chav Yesh Lo Zman Kavua. V'chol Mitzvahs Aseh Yesh Zman Grama Noshim P'turos. V'mratzu Lispor B'li Bracha Rishaus. He says if they want to count without a bracha, they're allowed to. That's the typical Sephardi psak regarding Mitzvahs Aseh Yesh Zman Grama. Like they can shake the lulav but no bracha. Aval Enan Rishois Levarech. They're not permitted to make a bracha. They want. She bracha levatola. And he says, Al piyasod tov shanoshim lo tisprena klala oimer af bli bracha. He says, Al Zohar, they shouldn't do it bli bracha. Okay. So what I suggest we do, we will finish, we'll do both. This way we sort of complete Sefirat Ha Omer because we're going to be counting for the next Mirz Hashem 7 weeks. So next week we'll do both. We will finish the Sefirat Ha Omer and continue where we left off in the COVID halachas. And Mirz Hashem, that'll be a couple weeks. So we can start volume 7 shortly. Everybody, I'll get in mind and don't forget.
Good night. Thank you, Shkoyach.
No, don't forget to count.
Good night.
Don't forget to count.
Be well.